Unbelievable. Hey, you guys. So, this is Professor Vitt. This is one of our first review videos for our political philosophy midterm. And I'm going to break them up into shorter videos because there are a lot of questions to cover. I have actually typed out and recorded 10 questions, flipping between PowerPoints and so forth. Um, and the microphone didn't record. So they're already written out. Normally you would see me composing them, but so I'm just going to narrate the answer, give you some ideas, flip back and forth between some PowerPoints, and then you guys will have your video. So okay, so there are two general parts to the exam. You're going to have a part A where you're just giving me short answer questions. Some of them will be remarkably short. Then you're going to have a second part, a part B, where I give you a passage and you're going to tell me who's writing it, what they're talking about. Okay, let's start with question number 1. What is political philosophy? Political philosophy is generally the study of how people ought to be related to one another in society. Specifically, political philosophy considers a number of issues, including but not limited to ethics, justice, the structure of government, the role of the individual to government, and other social issues. So political philosophy is the study of people living together and how ought they live together. The important point here is the word ought, right? Political science might be more concerned with how structures are currently operating. So political scientists would know an awful lot more about the current structure of the Electoral College and how that's operated in the last 2 or 3 election cycles on a national scale or something like that. Political philosophy, we're asking more theoretical questions about what way things ought to be rather than how they are. As a result, it's going to cover really broad issues. It's going to cover what the best regime would be, and that's what we really mean here by the structure of government, right? What the role of reason could be in determining government, role of reason versus tradition, what relationship the individual should have to the government. Should the individual be more important, or should the society be more important? All right. Next up, why study political philosophy? Well, we study it because humans are by their nature social, which means they are going to live together. And so because we are going to be living together, it's a good idea to study how we should be doing this, right? So what would be the best type of government, right? We're likely to live under some kind of ruling government, whether that's a despot, a ruling tyrant who's taken over by force, or whether it's a democratically elected regime. Which of those is better? Why? And so forth. So it's kind of inevitable that we're going to be studying together and we're going to be living together. Sorry, I was just as human beings. And so it's obvious then that we would want to study the best way to do that. Okay, next up, why are we reading the Watchmen in this course? Well, we're reading the Watchmen because it addresses a lot of issues in political philosophy. And we have tied it specifically to the Republic so far. But just an example, it begins with the unsolved murder of the comedian. And an unsolved murder is an injustice against the state, right? If someone committed a crime, that crime needs to be punished to keep the fabric of the state together. And so that would be just one example of why we're discussing this. Now, you don't need to go into what the themes are of the Watchmen and the Republic. But because there are so many in common, you could mention a different one. So you could talk about nuclear deterrence, and we're studying this because it's an aspect of political philosophy or something like that. There are lots of other examples there, and I listed a few for you. All right, number 4. In what ways do Plato and Alan Moore use characters to express a concept? You must provide an example from the Republic and the Watchmen that demonstrates this point. Specifically name the character and explain how this character stands in for a concept. All right, so the easiest way to start this is to talk about the Republic first. And remember when we talked about the Republic, we had a number of characters. We had Cephalus. Let me see if I can just move this just a teensy bit for you guys. There we go. We talked about Cephalus. and how Cephalus stands for this notion of justice, that you pay your debts, and then later Cephalus becomes, you don't need to discuss the critique, but then later Cephalus becomes the part of the tripartite division of the soul. So he becomes part of the appetitive part of the soul, that part of you that has craving or a desire, whether it's for thirst or money, and so forth. So that would be your first one. So you can use Cephalus, Polemarchus, Thrasymachus, any of those would be fine. It would be nice if you showed me someone other than Cephalus, right? Just because that's the model answer, but it's okay. You can use anyone. Rorschach stands for the concept of retributivist justice. So the idea that evil must be punished because it is evil, right? Not for any other reason, not for the consequences, not because it lowers crime, but instead just because evil is evil and it should be punished. Now, Rorschach stands for this concept by this very nature, the way that he looks, right? He sees the world in black and white. He himself is got this mask that is black and white. He sees the world in terms of good and evil, just as the mask does, right? In terms of black and white. So that's how a character in the Watchmen stands for the concept of retributivist justice, which is that evil must be punished because it is evil. All right. Now, notice I did not ask for the critique there in that. Okay. What is the central question of the